before the video ridiculously cut me off, this is my third video on experience, language and logic and drama. Now, I was just talking about something called a structure-bound process. I'm just going to remind you. I talked about a little boy who'd been bullied and the fight, flight and freeze mechanisms were coming into play, and there was lots of energy. There may have been a cognitive aspect to it, internalising that statements about being useless and stupid, and there was a sort of narrative to it. Now, what happens is that somehow these experiences get cut off. They're not integrated into the rest of us, and external events, external triggers, or even internal triggers come in, and they trigger these automatic ways of automatic patterns, and those patterns involve blocked physiological energy from the fight, flight and freeze. They also involve explanations, stories, and they're actually associated quite vividly with life incidents. Now, the question surfaces as to how we heal from those traumatic experiences. That's a very interesting question. There are lots of different ways for us to heal. From a CBT perspective, we have to simply reprogram, if you like, our thinking, or reprogram the neocortex with new forms of language and new forms of thought. The problem with that is that there's a sort of mythology behind CBT that as we think, so we experience or feel. And of course, as I've already shown, in terms of child development, feelings, sensations and emotions come first, prior to thinking, and thinking in itself is simply, or not simply, but it's part of a conceptualization process from experience. So, in focusing and experiential psychotherapy, we don't have the top-down approach of trying to reprogram thinking and feeling, reprogram thinking and therefore change feeling. And the experience is that it's very hit and miss when we try and do that. But what we try and do is to get down to the experiential roots of that thinking. And that means doing stuff that perhaps is counterintuitive. After all, if you've experienced a traumatic number of feelings in the body, maybe the last place you actually want to go to is back into your body. But there are ways of working through this. One of the ways of working through this is indeed perhaps very simple body awareness ideas. This comes not from focusing but from mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And the idea behind this is, for example, that you very gently become aware of your body, that if you're feeling traumatic hurts and pain, that instead of trying to reframe them, as in CBT, you actually notice them, you're in relationship with them, you say hello to them, you simply be aware of them and acknowledge them for as long as it's safe to do so. And the experience is, for example, that people who are willing to be there and to be in relationship, using, for example, I'm aware of this hurting feeling, I'm aware of this tension, I'm aware of this pain, and you stay in relationship with it rather than being right in the middle of it, then that in itself allows the structure-bound process to begin to change and unfold of its own accord. You don't have to deliberately change it. If you imagine, for example, this hand as being my trauma, and this hand as being me. Now, if I try and boot the trauma away, it'll go back and it'll grab me and take power over me. But if I'm in the middle of it, like this, then again that tends not to process the experience. But if I am in a relationship with the trauma, gently touching the fringes of it, then this process, this act of acceptance and loving kindness begins to allow the traumatic structure-bound process, or the traumatic process, to unfold and change of its own accord. And many people, in fact, experience all sorts of instances being highly traumatic. You don't have to be in a war to be traumatized. You don't have to experience an earthquake to be traumatized. You don't have to have been raped or abused to be traumatized. In fact, Peter Levine, in his excellent book, Waking the Tiger, a book I thoroughly recommend to anyone who's getting symptoms of trauma, such as suddenly freezing, no apparent reason, getting recurring nightmares, who perhaps is actually living out in their life or reenacting some traumatic incident. I thoroughly recommend the book by Peter Levine called Waking the Tiger, and I'll show that on a further YouTube video. But certainly very simple body awareness techniques. For example, when you have a shower, get a pulsating shower and just really try and notice the body and notice how the body is feeling. When you get hurt and pain rising up, try not to be in the middle of it. Try not to boot it away, but try instead just to be in a relationship with it. Being in a relationship, saying hello, acknowledging it, actually means that once that is acknowledged, what frequently happens is that it might temporarily intensify, but you acknowledge it again and it begins to fade of its own accord. Anyway, I hope that you're finding this interesting, and I'd be interested in responses to it.